Got it up? So you got to just mute yourself. Otherwise, you're going to drive us all insane. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we're up to Sif Zayin. V'chein hadin v'chol zeh. So you just got to mute your phone, please. Yeah. V'chein hadin v'chol zeh b'shtar mechira u'matana. The same would hold true if you're an escrow holder and you have in your possession a bill of sale or a bill of gift. Ki afal pi shelo shayach bahen piraon. He says, even though we're not concerned about payment that was already made, yesh, please mute your phone. What you may need to do, just there's an option to mute, right? Yesh lachush lahamlacha shemanim lach lamakna milahaknos. He says you still have to be concerned. Let's say it's a bill of sale, and it says basically that on such and such a date, Reuven sold widgets to Shimon. Okay, some merchandise, and now Shimon wants to take that documentation and use it to collect the merchandise from Reuven's warehouse. So you can't immediately just deliver that document to Shimon with the assumption that everything's hunky-dory, right? Why? Because maybe the reason why you were given this document to hold on to it, or the decedent was given the document to hold on to it, was because the sale had not yet been made, and they were preparing papers to decide so that Reuven could have a chance to decide whether or not to sell it, because he needed to verify that certain terms were going to be fulfilled. He needed to verify the price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why they put the bill of sale in the possession of a third party to get ready for a sale. But you don't know whether the sale has taken place. You don't know whether Shimon has paid the cash. And it's possible that Reuven has already changed his mind. And maybe that document, which was for selling widgets last month, no longer has any applicability to this month, because maybe the price of widgets has gone through the roof. And who knows, right? So and maybe he just put the bill of sale with escrow, so he wanted the guy to hold on to it until he would make up his mind whether or not he wanted to sell. And at that point, he would release the document over to the purchaser, or to the recipient. But maybe there was no kinyan yet, and this is a record of a kinyan that has not yet taken place. And therefore, if the seller, the guy who holds the merchandise, basically says, I didn't give this document to you in order for you to release it to the buyer, I wanted you to hold on to it until such time that I decide that I want to sell it to him. But it's not your right to release it to the buyer so that the buyer can now pressure me to sell him the goods because he's got a bill of sale, right? Didn't happen yet. Okay, so Kuf Pei Hey, V'chein adin b'chol zeh b'shtar mechiru matana rod salomar. That is to say, the imatzam etzlo ve'eni yodei amativa mimanosin hipkido o makabel. In other words, you find a person is an escrow holder, and he finds in his possession a bill of sale between Reuven and Shimon, and he doesn't remember. Did Reuven give me this bill of sale to hold on to it for safekeeping, or did Shimon give me the bill of sale? He simply doesn't know. Okay, so let's go a little bit further. So this is actually, we're on page 20 now. So this is the last halacha of the set, and then we'll go on to the next set. So, Bamed dvarim amurim, bishtar she'ein bo kinyan sudar. Aval im yesh bo kinyan sudar v'hushtar mechiru matana shelo shayach behen piraon. He says, but all of the aforementioned, where we talked about a bill of sale that you should not release it to the buyer, is only when a kinyan sudar has not been recorded in the shtar. Now, what is a kinyan sudar? It says in the shtar, vikanina. It says a kinyan was made on this sale, and it's signed by witnesses. In other words, the witnesses are not only witness to the fact that this bill of sale represents a sale, but they also are signing on to the fact that they actually witnessed a physical transaction with a handkerchief taking place between the buyer and the seller. And so this is not only a representation of this document doesn't only represent the sale, but it is testimony about a transaction that already took place on a particular date. So if the shtar is testimony about a transaction that said it took place, let's say, on January 1st, is when the transaction took place, okay? And now I find this in my possession. So I have evidence of a transaction that actually took place. There's no concern that perhaps there was some kind of kickback or whatever it was, because it's a record of something that actually took place, where Shimon paid the money or said he was going to pay the money, however it's worded in the shtar. But once the transaction is recorded, it means that now Shimon is the owner of those widgets, because basically it says that on January 1st, Reuven sold a pallet of widgets to Shimon, and the transaction took place with a kinyan suitor. Shimon took legal possession of those widgets that are located in Reuven's warehouse. Now that means that Shimon has a legal right to those widgets, and they belong to him. Whether or not payment has been made would also be recorded in the shtar. But Reuven now cannot say, don't release that bill of sale to Shimon, because it's actually a record of a transaction. So it's not the, remember we learned before that a shtar can serve one of two functions. It can actually be the transaction itself when the shtar is delivered from the seller to the purchaser, or it can be a record of a prior transaction that took place. So when the shtar is just a record of a transaction that already took place, so then there's no reason why the escrow holder should be constrained from releasing that document to the buyer. That would be the correct thing to do. Okay? So so then yachzirenu lahalokech, then he should give it back to the purchaser, o lahamakabel matana, or to the recipient. Let's say if it records a gift. Lefisha misha shekanu miyado mischayev. He says because as soon as the kinyan was transacted, the Shimon becomes the owner of that pallet of widgets, and Reuven is obligated to deliver them to him, to release them to him. The hashtar eno ela l'raya, and the shtar is only proof of a transaction, but it's not the transaction itself. It's proof of a prior transaction. But when do we say that you should automatically release it to the buyer? Kishe'ein yadua mi hifkido. That's only when you don't know, the escrow holder doesn't remember who gave me this piece of paper. Did I get it from the seller or did I get it from the buyer? And remember, in the previous instance where the shtar is the transaction itself, and I don't remember who gave it to me, then it could be the transaction didn't take place yet, so I shouldn't release it to either party. So, but in this situation where the transaction is recorded as having already taken place, and I don't remember who gave it to me, so then what difference does it make? Let me just release it to the buyer because he's already transacted and taken possession. Aval im yadua shehamakne hifkido rak shelo piresh malasos bo. But let's say I remember that the bill of purchase, the bill of sale, was given to me by the seller. Now, why did the seller give me a bill of sale that records a prior transaction? Why did the seller give it to me? If it should have been given immediately as soon as the transaction took place, the bill of sale should have been given to the buyer. So it could be that maybe there was a transaction that took place and the seller then said, okay, the widgets are yours, but you don't get the bill of sale until you do X, Y, and Z. In other words, I need you to fulfill certain conditions in order for you to take physical possession of something that you are now the owner of. Now, that's a theoretical possibility. I'm willing to sell you the widgets, and we'll make a kinyan. The widgets are now yours, but not so fast. You want to come and pick them up? Bring a bonded refrigerator truck, because the widgets are perishable, or whatever it is. In other words, don't. I'm not going to let you come and bring whatever thing you want onto my property. You've got to show that you've got to demonstrate that you're going to handle them responsibly. Okay, or whatever condition he makes. He says, "V'gam achshav eino kan kagon shemes," and the seller that I remember gave this to me is not present in order for me to ask him why he wanted me to hold on to this bill of sale. Let's say, for example, he's already passed away. So in that scenario, where I know that the seller gave me the document, I should not release it to the buyer. Why? Because it could be at the time that the transaction was made, it was part of the terms of the sale that the witnesses should give the bill of sale to the seller and not to the buyer. So that he should have the option of, even though I made a transaction, I still want the option to renege. I still want the option to go back and change I want to reserve the right to change my mind. And that's the reason why I'm asking you that I should hold on to the bill of sale, because I'm still waiting for the buyer to show whatever good faith I'm waiting for him to demonstrate. And that's certainly true if the seller is still alive and the seller presents himself and says, we gave it to an escrow holder for the express purpose of, because I wanted to still hold on to the option of not delivering the widgets to the buyer. Yes, it's true, I made a kinyan with him, but at the time I made the kinyan, I demanded to hold on to the bill of sale because I still wanted there to be strings attached to me. V'gam lo yachziru liyorshe hamakne, nor should the document be given to the heirs of the seller, ki shema lo hisna klumim ha'edim, v'gomar v'hikna, because you don't know. In other words, in a situation, where the seller is deceased, and I remember he gave it to me, but I don't know now why he gave it to me and why he didn't just give it to the buyer. I can't give it now to the heirs of the seller because maybe it was a legitimate sale without any strings attached. The Gomar v'hikna. Aval himamakna chai v'toin kain yachzirenu lo kevin sheyadua shuhu ifkido. But if the seller is alive and he says, I gave you the document so that I would have the right to retake it and not go through with the sale, then if you recall that the seller gave it to you, you should give it back to the seller, if that indeed is what his claim is. If he's not around and we don't know what to do, so then I'm going to hold on to it until Eliyahu Hanavi comes, or we'll go to Beis Din, and I'll ask the buyer and the seller to verify their position, right? Like Marv had said, it exists in secular law. But in a situation where the seller says, you remember I gave it to you, now please give it back to me, so then I should give it back to the seller, even though it records a kinyan that already took place. Well, let's say there are no conditions. It's just a very short star. It just says on such and such a date, Reuven sold a pallet of widgets to Shimon, and the escrow holder doesn't remember why he was asked to hold it, but he does remember that the seller told him to hold on to it. So then when the seller asks it back from him, he should give it back to the seller. We'll hold it here. What? Even if the what? You mean a kinyan? Yeah, even if it records a kinyan. Yes. Yeah, that's what he's saying. Okay, we'll go to the commentary tomorrow.